Aberdeen. We're going to ask each candidate to introduce who they are, their party, and an issue which is important to them personally. So we'll just do it in alphabetical order. Barry Black, welcome, thank you. Can you introduce yourself to us, please?
Thanks, Hector, and thanks all for coming and for having me this afternoon. My name is Barry Black. I'm Scottish Labour's candidate in my home seat of Aberdeen Central, and I'm also on Scottish Labour's North East regional list. I'm an education researcher, and education is really the issue that's inspired me into politics. I don't believe we can achieve social justice until people from the poorest backgrounds have the same life chances of those from the richest, and closing the educational attainment gap is my #1 priority.
Okay, thank you. Maggie, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Hello there, thanks very much, Hector. I'm Maggie Chapman and I'm the top list candidate for the Scottish Greens in the North East. I'm a Scot by choice. I was born and brought up in Zimbabwe and moved here for university. I now work for a charity that supports survivors of gender-based violence and does prevention work to raise awareness of and educate people about violence against women and girls. I was rector of Aberdeen University for the last 6 years. I believe we need a green recovery from the pandemic that creates jobs and invests in our communities, and that's why I'm asking you to vote green.
Thank you very much, Maggie. I didn't know about the Zimbabwe connection. My postgraduate work was about Zimbabwe. Anyway, Fatima, welcome.
Thank you very much for having me. My name is Fatima Joji and I'm the top list candidate for the SNP in the North East region. I was born and raised in West Hill, Aberdeenshire, and I'm of Nigerian ethnicity. I worked as a journalist and in the humanitarian sector, and I currently work for the SNP just now. My main interests are in social justice and social mobility, as well as in the case for independence or democratic right to choose. I believe that this election is about so much more than the immediate challenges we face. This is also about recovery and building a fairer Scotland. That's why I'm asking you to give both your votes to the SNP for a serious and experienced leadership and a programme to kickstart the recovery. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm really impressed at how we've begun so brief and to the point. Well done. Alison, please.
Hello, I'm Alison Simpson. I'm the candidate for Banffshire and Buchan Coast for the Scottish Liberal Democrats. Originally, I'm an artist, but I am now also a social enterprise and community engagement specialist. I grew up in rural Sutherland and I have lived for the last 37 years in rural Banffshire. I know we're all here because we want to do the right thing. And all the evidence is that societies and economies are stronger when everyone can contribute. That's why I joined the Liberal Democrats. Human rights are absolutely central to their purpose. And I've been the Lib Dems since 2017. My particular central issue is mental health. And that is why I would commend the Liberal Democrat vote to you.
Okay, thank you so much, Alison. I'm a Sutherland lad myself, and my wife was head girl in Dornoch Academy. So there you go. So all these connections. Is Stuart here yet? No, we'll have to just circumnavigate Stuart and go on to our first question. It's a question that Gun will ask on behalf of the Scottish Refugee Council and the City of Sanctuary. I'm assuming you heard a little bit about our background, which was processed by the refugees arriving in the city from Syria. Gun, please.
Thank you, Hector. I'm warning the candidates right now. It's a slightly long question, but I will put the text of it in the chat, or maybe one of my colleagues can do that for me. Okay, so here goes. The proposed UK new plan for immigration has increased anxiety amongst refugees and migrants in this community who already feel the effects of the hostile environment. To counteract this anxiety around further restriction of rights and entitlements, will you sign Scottish Refugee Council's Welcome Pledge, and how will you put the pledge into action into North East? The Welcome Pledge states, this year, on May 6th, history will be made in Scotland as people with refugee status vote in the Scottish Parliament elections for the first time. I promise to make Scotland a welcoming place and to stand up for the rights, dignity and protection of all people seeking safety and rebuilding their lives here.
Great question, Gun. Thank you very much. Barry, can you address the question for us, please?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and I will absolutely go on and sign the pledge just after I've spoken, because I think it encapsulates sort of everything that we need to aspire Scotland to be. I think it's very welcome that this time, for the first time, refugees and asylum seekers have the right to vote in this election. That should be expanded to all elections, including UK ones. You know, if you live here, you are a Scot and you have the right to participate in how Scotland will choose its future. I think more broadly on the question that you raise, I think we have been for many years, but particularly coming out of the EU into the sort of phase of Brexit that we've seen, and the hostile environment that's been in place for the past 10 years or so, and longer, but you know, really under this Conservative government since 2010, has been one that not just on a humanitarian level, on a human level, has been counterproductive, but also on an economic level as well. None of it makes sense. It's completely counterproductive, and we need to stand against it. So I completely agree with the pledge. I'll sign it just now, as I say, and we'll work every day, if I'm lucky enough to be elected in 2 weeks, to ensure that it's realised in you know, as soon as possible in Scotland as we move on.
Super. Thanks for being so brief and to the point, Barry. Maggie?
Thanks very much, Hector, and thank you, Goon, for this question. Absolutely, yes, I will sign that pledge. I'm proud that it was the Scottish Greens that pushed for the right to vote for refugees. We won that right in the Scottish Parliament, and I want us to extend that actually to all asylum seekers. The right to vote, the right to have a say in how Scotland is run, should not depend on your immigration status. In 2014, I was the lead candidate for the Greens in that European election campaign, and I was very clear about our primary message, which was to make Scotland a welcoming nation. And that changed the nature, that changed the character of Scottish politics. At that election, the SNP nicked our slogan. They nicked that line about being a welcoming nation. But it was the first time that someone had stood up to the dominant narrative of hate and aggression against people coming into our country. The story we tell ourselves about immigration is really, really important, and we must guard against all forms of complacency. We've created a very different public debate, but the Greens have done that to one that is in many other countries at the moment. We have campaigned to end the hostile environment, which started under the Tory Lib Dem coalition government when Theresa May was Home Secretary, and we need to do whatever we can to guard against further oppressions and further restrictions on immigration coming through. The Scottish Greens stand very clearly for the rights of refugees and believe Scotland should do everything in its power to welcome them. Asylum seekers, as you know, have often fled war, famine, discrimination. Many have embarked on perilous journeys, and we should be welcoming them with open arms. That is why I was really, really pleased to ensure that as Greens, where we have groups of Green councillors, in Edinburgh and Glasgow, we signed up to the City of Sanctuary pledge, and those two cities are now cities of sanctuary, thanks to work the Greens have done. There is so much more we need to do in this area, you know, calling on the UK government to accept more asylum seekers, particularly unaccompanied children, fighting to close the Dungavel Detention Centre, which is just an abomination of human rights. And as I said earlier, we want to extend voting rights to all asylum seekers, building on the extension of franchise to refugees, which we secured in the last Parliament. So there's a huge wealth of material that we need to be doing, we need to be delivering, because this is about human rights. This is about people's right to exist in a safe and welcoming place.
Okay, thank you very much. Fatima?
Thank you very much for that question. The SNP has been very clear on where we stand on this issue. We're absolutely, first and foremost, a welcoming party. We are glad to say that we might possibly elect our first ever refugee MSP, standing in Glasgow, Rosa Sally. So that's a possibility, and that can be done with both votes SNP. I'll have to say that personally, it is very concerning to see the Home Office press ahead with plans to reform the asylum system in a way that could lead the UK to breach its obligations under human rights laws. And if you look at the 1951 Refugee Convention as well, that we could end up breaching that. And the fact that the Tories are still considering this absolutely speaks volumes. I can confirm and I can reassure that we will continue to urge the Tory government to introduce a fair and humane asylum and refugee system where people have the right to work and to contribute to society. We know that asylum seekers, we all know that asylum seekers and refugees are among some of the most vulnerable people in the country, often fleeing unimaginable danger, violence and threats. I can say that my colleague, my SNP colleague, Stuart MacDonald MP, who's in Westminster just now, has also repeatedly urged the Home Office to drop its hostile environment approach to migration and asylum. But the stark reality is that the Scottish Parliament needs these powers, these devolved powers. We don't have them to create an immigration system that reflects our values as an open and welcoming country. And that's the kind of country that the SNP wants to build for Scotland. But I can say that under the SNP, we will introduce a fair and humane asylum and refugee system where people have the right to work and to contribute to society. We are all humans and we are all valued. My question is always, what can Scotland do for you? And we want to lift the harmful restrictions caused by things such as no recourse to public funds. But I have to end by saying that it is a reality. We need independence and full power over our migration policy so we can do this. Thank you.
Super. Thank you very much. I've just heard that Stuart's arrived. So I'm going to repeat part of the question and hope he won't be caught out. So the question is basically, will you be prepared to sign the Scottish Refugee Council's welcome pledge to immigrants and refugees particularly? And how can you put that pledge into action in the North East? Alison, can you give us your response, please?
Yes, of course we will sign up to your pledge. I would do it right now. The Liberal Democrats believe we must do all we can to protect people forced to flee their homes to escape war and persecution. We have a proud history of providing sanctuary to those in need in this country, and the government has to uphold that important British tradition. Because the Conservatives have ended the Dems scheme for unaccompanied child refugees in Europe after resettling just 480 children since 2016. They've chosen to take the UK out of Europe for Europe-wide protections for unaccompanied refugee children. They've made no commitment on refugee resettlement beyond next year, and they refuse to expand family reunion rules so that unaccompanied child refugees can sponsor family members to join them. People who are forced to flee their homes to escape war and persecution should be protected. The Home Office is not fit for purpose, and we certainly need to take steps to ameliorate their actions here. In the hostile environment, led members of the Windrush generation to be deprived of their rights, detained and even deported. Treating the people who reach our borders with deserve dignity, and their applications need to be treated with common sense. This is also the best way to combat people smuggling, human trafficking, and protecting people from attempting dangerous channel crossings. Our party conference last year resolved to lobby the UK government to make a fully funded commitment to resettle 10,000 refugees a year, in addition to 10,000 child refugees a year, and over the next 10 years. Immigration statistics show that just 823 refugees were resettled in the UK last year. Currently, asylum seekers are banned from working while they wait for a decision, and they're forced to rely on asylum support payments of only $39.63.
Okay. Did you were just about wound up, Alison, were you?
Oh no, sorry, it was that 30 seconds or was that finish?
I can't remember what the rules are, Dave.
That's the 2 minutes, yeah. So the sign, hold up the sign for 30 seconds. And
I didn't see
We
that.
didn't see the sign.
No, because sorry, I'll have to change my settings. Sorry.
Okay.
Or I would have wound up.
And,
Sorry.
Stuart, can I welcome you and thank you for turning up? Are you recovered from your please take and able to attempt to answer this question? My name's Hector, by the way. Are we sure he's here?
You'll have to tell me every time, Tom. You doubtless forget. Right. Well, thank you. I'm delighted to be here. And indeed, I would have been on time, but I'm sure you people know that the schools are incredibly difficult at the moment, particularly secondary schools. So I came in and had an unexpected please take this afternoon, but I shall crack on. I haven't seen the pledge, but I can't think of a reason why I wouldn't sign it, because very supportive, and the Conservatives are, of refugees. So in principle, but I obviously would need to see the wording of it properly before I could personally commit to it fully. I'm really pleased to do this topic because we have a fantastic record of welcoming people from around the world and taking in refugees at the United Kingdom. We are one of the leaders of doing that. And just on a personal thing, just thinking about the last speaker saying that, and the refugees made me realize, which I hadn't actually thought about before, I'm personally descended from a Belgian refugee during World War I, who was in Edinburgh and had a dalliance with my great-great-grandmother. So the refugees, and long before that, the Huguenots and all kinds of things. But if you want to bring it up to modern days, and we talk about the Northeast, which I think you had mentioned. Is it Hector? I do apologize if it's not. Yes, it is Hector. We have a wonderful organization in Aberdeenshire, and I'll speak for Aberdeenshire at the moment, to the Syrian New Scots. I don't know if someone else has already mentioned them, but there is a fantastic work in there. There's my 30 seconds gone already. So I'll just say to the pledge, yes, I would sign it, and I'm very proud of the United Kingdom's attitude towards the refugees.
Thank you very much, Stuart. That's 5 out of 5 signatures for you, Gun. Great question, great response, thank you. Now you're going to meet, next question, Syrian New Scot called Hint. So we have quite a number of Syrian New Scots that we work very closely with in the city of Aberdeen. So welcome, Hind. I can't see your picture, but it's good to have you here. So would you like to put your question, please?
Yes, okay, thank you so much, Hector.
Good to hear you.
Yes, my question is, if you are successful, can you assist in finding work that will be full-time for refugees and they will be committed to it? Also, long-term work for teenagers.
Question about employment. So I'm going to continue in a rota way of asking the candidates. So Maggie, you move up to first answer this question. Hind was asking if you can offer assistance in finding work that will be permanent for refugees and they would be committed to it and work for either men or women, and in the longer term for the teenagers or the families of the refugees who are here, the New Scots families who are here. Okay, Maggie.
Great, thanks very much for that question. I think work is a really, really important part of our lives. It gives people dignity, it gives people purpose, and it allows people to make a contribution to their communities. I think we know that employment is a really, really important issue for all immigrants, whether people are refugees or not. And I think there is something particularly problematic around the UK government's reliance on different types of immigration status to focus in on certain types of economic activity. You know, the way different types of visas are used to enable or disable people from working, we need to change that, absolutely. For refugees particularly, I think there's something about ensuring that there is the support that I know organisations like GREC, the Grampian Regional Equalities Council, provides. Supporting people into work is really, really important. If refugees have come to Scotland, I think that they will face several barriers, economic barriers, as well as other barriers to the work market. And we need to do whatever we can to break down those barriers. So there's something about supporting people with the skills they need to do to write job applications in the way employers expect job applications to be written. There's support needed if interpreters are required, skills training, language training, and other training. We should be providing that. And I think there's something about thinking about education and support for all workers across Scotland, that's really, really important. The issue you raise about teenagers, I think, is vital here too. As our young people grow up and start to make their way in the world, we need to be there supporting them. We need to ensure that there are jobs available for them in the first place, and we have a big, the Greens have a big job creation plan, but we also need to make sure that those jobs have fair pay and conditions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I don't know whether Maggie just finished in time or the clock.
Just.
I thought you just made it, yeah. And Fatima, you're next in my rota for responding to this question.
Thank you. Regarding the right to work for refugees, I've made it very clear in the beginning that we will continue to urge the Tory government to introduce a fair and humane asylum system and refugee system where people have the right to work and to contribute to society, because it is a right. Refugees are humans and have very valuable skills, and it's not just about the skills, it's about having rights in the first place. So absolutely, we believe in that and we will push for it consistently. Regarding jobs for young people, we have already committed that if re-elected as a government through both votes SNP, we will fund the young person's guarantee of university, college, apprenticeships, training, placements or jobs for every young person who wants it. Because we recognise, particularly because of the pandemic, that young adults are disproportionately employed in sectors most affected by the economic shutdown, so are most likely to be out of jobs. And they face the heightened exposure of job loss or furlough. And in recognition of the impact COVID has had on lives and opportunities of young people, particularly those entering the jobs market for the first time, we will increase the age at which young people become eligible for council tax. And for a young person living in a band B property, that will mean an annual saving of around £750. So we want to actually introduce measures that not only ensure that young people can get access to the job market, but to alleviate the financial strain due to the precarious position some young people may find themselves in due to circumstance of simply being young, which should not be a penalty. So we have absolutely got these measures in place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fatima. Alison?
Hello. Yes, well, Lib Dems across the UK, but especially Christine Jardine and Alistair Carmichael, have been working to persuade the government, particularly to finally lift the ban and give asylum seekers the right to work. I mean, it's absolutely crucial that people should be supported to take part in society, and working and supporting yourself is part of self-respect. And generally feeling that you do belong in this place. We also need, of course, to ensure that the jobs are available, because a lot of jobs are currently at risk due to the pandemic, and the asylum seekers are very likely to start off in the types of job in hospitality in particular, and in tourism that are currently under threat. We are also proposing a jobs guarantee for every young person, a job for every young person that wants it. And we also simply need to extend the same care and attention and support to every child of every asylum seeker as we would want to have extended to our own.
Thank you indeed, that's good. And no card shown saying 30 seconds, which is super. Stuart, are you okay to have a go at this question, please?
Absolutely, and thank Hind for asking it. As I say, I preempted it, and Hector mentioned the work they do in Aberdeen. I think this has been a real success story, because originally it wasn't. We all know that there were some hostility when the councils said they would take them in. And I think we've done, across the United Kingdom, we've taken at least 20,000 Syrian refugees. And I don't know if we have Europe Must Act with this, but if we get on to that with the Aegeans, I personally, I'll speak for myself, I would take more. I think it's been a wonderful success that what we've done in Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire. And in terms of work and what we need to do to support them, I would endorse a lot of what Maggie said about the need for translators and all that. And I think certainly, again, I'll speak for Aberdeenshire Council, we have a fantastic unit that does that. And I'm guessing that Murray and Aberdeen will have an equally good unit that does include them and make sure that people feel including and welcome. I think Scotland, I think United Kingdom is an incredibly welcoming place. And I think we have to do, I'll ask one question, so my 30 seconds haven't come up. The Danes have withdrawn their settlement rights to the refugees from the Syrian refugees. And is that the same in the British system, that they're only temporarily here, then that they then also have to apply for asylum to stay beyond that? Because personally, I would very much not like to see our young Scots Syrian refugees have to return at some point.
We can talk about resettlement at another time, but it seems amazing. Have you had sight of the questions? Because Aberdeen Must Act is going to be the next question. Barry, can you respond to Hin's question, please?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I think, you know, work really is at the core of participation in society. And I agree with much of what many candidates have said already about the need to actually have the right to work within our asylum policy. And clearly coming through this pandemic, as other candidates have mentioned as well, the impact on jobs is going to have to be one of the key things that we need to focus our recovery on. It's great to see so many parties' manifesto include Labour's youth guarantee. It surely means that we're very quickly in the next Parliament going to see action on guaranteeing jobs for young people. And what we need to see is the particular groups who find at points because of structural social reasons getting into the workplace harder, particularly disabled young people, but you know, refugee and asylum seeking young people as well, need to be at the core of that focus on guaranteeing jobs and getting young people into the labour market. I think much of what Maggie has said as well around the actual organisations who are supporting young people in this situation is key. And it's about us not reinventing the wheel. You know, there's so many great organisations carrying out this great work, a lot of them, of course, on the call today, and it's ensuring that the support from local authorities and from central government is flowing to allow that work to continue and allow that work to flourish.
Okay, thank you very much. And Hind, can I thank you so much for your question, and please convey my love to your family.
Thank you so much, Doctor. Yes.
I hope that Ramadan is going well for you.
Yes, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for everyone.
Thank you indeed. We're going to move on to our next question now, which is about Aberdeen Must Act, which Stuart mentioned. And Dale is here from the movement Aberdeen or Europe Must Act, and she's going to pose a question on behalf of Aberdeen Must Act. Thank you, Dale. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
Hello, thank you for having me along to ask a question. So Europe Must Act is a social movement campaigning for the relocation of asylum seekers from the appalling Aegean island camps and generally for a more humane migration policy. My question is, how will you advocate for humane policies for refugees and asylum seekers, in particular those who need urgent relocation from the inhumane conditions in the Greek camps?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. Fatima, can we begin with you? Did you get the question okay?
Yeah, I did, yeah. So regarding the inhumane conditions, first of all, I must say that we have been very vocal about this. It is appalling. It's an atrocity to hear about, even from the barracks and the conditions that some refugees and asylum seekers find themselves in. It is appalling, and the UK government should be ashamed for these conditions. I can say in Scotland, the SNP, we will build on our Moving to Scotland initiative, where we will establish a migration service for Scotland to help people to settle easily into communities across Scotland and access information on rights and services available to them, because that's also really important. And we need to also recognise that with migration reserved to Westminster, we cannot provide proof of status in Scotland just now. However, we will explore the creation of a physical card for EU citizens with pre-settled status, and also we will extend this. We will create mechanisms that are easy for refugees as well, to be able to make it easier to access public services in Scotland. And we will also refresh our New Scot strategy for refugees and ensure people with lived experience of migration and asylum are at the heart of the development. And we will go further than the previous strategy and include a strand for people of all nationalities who make Scotland their home, because we stand on the firm principle that it's people who make Scotland. We don't believe in this sort of blood and soil ethnic nationalism. It's people who make Scotland, and that's us in our diversity, and everyone deserves this inclusion and integration into society, and no one should be treated in such appalling conditions that we're seeing just now.
Thank you very much indeed. Alison, are you able to address this question?
I have to admit, I don't know a lot about these camps, but I am familiar with conditions in camps in other parts of Europe, and the conditions are horrific. The occupants, many of them children, are speaking rough. They're at risk of exploitation, violence and abuse. And in fact, they've got this far. They've come knowing the routes they've taken could kill them. It just shows how absolutely desperate they are. Often people are trying to will want to try and join family members, and we should support that. And we should certainly defend their rights to come here, and ensure that migrants, when they get here, have access to public services. And I support the principle whereby Scottish institutions do not act as Home Office border guards. I would absolutely defend their right to be here and to stay and to be looked after. And certainly also the steps we've taken to welcome people into Aberdeenshire, I think, are exemplary. They've been done through a community learning and development approach. They've taken care of language and community integration, and that is the approach we want to push forward with.
Thank you very much indeed. Stuart, you must have an answer since you anticipated the question.
Well, I will admit to insider knowledge, not to the question, but Dale is a dear colleague of mine. She retired a couple of years ago from my school, and her daughter and her have been pushing this. And I followed their work in the P&J and raising all these things. And I'll just say, since I'm on here, because I haven't seen Dale since I done, great admiration for what you're doing, and thank you for what you are doing to raise awareness of this issue. And like I said, I think the Syrian refugees has been such a success. I would gladly take more. I'd gladly take more a share of this. The camps, as you highlighted, are absolutely horrific, and it's heartbreaking to see what's happening there. The global answer to that, I think, is a global answer. I think it should be the United Nations who take control of these and should be doing it from that point of view. In terms of the refugees and taking more and what can we do, I'll maybe say something slightly controversial in dissent is, I think the first people you look at are the neighbouring countries and what can they do to help? Because again, if we were a crisis in Ireland, you'd expect the United Kingdom to be the first place to do it because it's right next to us. So I would encourage, and that's part of what we can do, is to show a leadership role by taking people in, by being welcoming, and say to other countries, come on, you need to do your bit as well. Because as I said, Britain's already taken 20,000, and I personally would happily take more, but the conditions in the camp are completely unacceptable.
Thank you very much indeed. Dale, I hope you don't mind me mentioning your daughter Isla, but she's a real champion of this and has been very, very impressive in pursuing the Aberdeen Must Act concept. So please say hello to her and congratulate her on her efforts. Barry.
Yeah, thank you for the question. And Dale, I'm sure will know much better than me, but I believe some of these camps now are at 800, 900% over capacity with just appalling conditions. And where I agree with Stuart is that the UK has a proud history of welcoming refugees, but I don't agree that the current Conservative government has a proud record on it at all. 20,000 Syrian refugees is by no means taking our fair share for our place in the world. And we see issues throughout the past 10 years, such as Lord Alf Dubs' Labour peer amendment to take in more unaccompanied child refugees that the UK government just completely ignored when they were returned with a majority in 2015. We need to be doing far more for our responsibility in this global crisis. We are a global leader, or should be, in this global crisis, and have shirked our responsibility so far by that means. And indeed, leaving it as well as an issue that is within Greece, which is already a country that's been so damaged by austerity in the past 10 years or so, with social problems going on top of social problems. We really have, and other major European countries, if you like, if I can define it that way, have shirked responsibility in this area. And we need to be far more of a world leader in doing so, in taking in people who are fleeing the most horrendous conditions and supporting them to set up a new life here. And the current UK government does not have a record that it should be proud of in this area at all.
Okay, thank you, Barry. And finally, Maggie, on this issue.
Thanks very much, Hector. I'm going to take a very, very green approach to this. I think we need to stop creating refugees. We need to stop destabilizing countries in the Middle East. We need to stop the damaging climate destruction that is happening around the world and creating more and more and more refugees. The current refugee crisis traces its roots, we can trace its roots back to the Labour war in Iraq and the Tory decision to destabilize Libya. We need to stop doing those things. So the best way to help refugees is to stop putting them out of their homes in the first place. However, I don't have a time machine yet, and we are where we are. So we need to make sure that we do absolutely whatever we can to treat people with compassion and care, rather than the hostile environment that has been created and sustained by the UK government. 6 years ago, I worked for Amina, the Muslim Women Support Project, and I started up the Refugee Support Project in Dundee, working with Amina and the local council and a couple of other voluntary partners as well. The thing that stopped us doing the work we needed to do was restrictions on how some of the funding could be used. We had to negotiate sometimes very complex and very expensive private rented accommodation to support people, because there wasn't the available wraparound support that we desperately needed for the Syrian refugee families that we brought. And that was just the tip of the iceberg. So we need to absolutely make sure that in our support for refugees and asylum seekers, there is no profiteering that goes on. We need to end private sector involvement and the profiteering of the process from start to finish. And we need to put compassion and care at the heart of what we do.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Can I say a couple of things? I want to commend our candidates for their brevity and for their clarity. It's very, very impressive. And I'm really impressed also with the amount of people who are posting. I haven't had time or occasion to read them yet, but who are posting information on the Zoom chat. Please continue to do that. Molly will be hoovering up questions to ask at the end, and maybe supplementaries to the issues that we've discussed. Now we're going to move on to another completely different issue, although somebody did drop it into the conversation earlier. Iona from Shelter is going to ask a question about no recourse to public funds Northeast, which was one of the seminars we held a few weeks ago. Iona, are you able to put your question?
Yeah, the no recourse public funds conditions set by the UK Home Office make it very restrictive for migrants to access support. Often this leaves them facing destitution at times of crisis for reasons out with their control, such as domestic abuse, unemployment, home office delays, health issues, etc. Whilst the powers to remove no recourse to public funds conditions are reserved, what would you and your party aim to do, either locally or nationally, within the devolved powers available to the Scottish Parliament to assist the often vulnerable individuals and families and prevent them facing destitution?
Okay, thank you, Iona, for the question. It's a full question and demands an answer. To continue the rota that we're trying to work with here, Alison, you're top of the list to begin to address this question.
Well, people subjected to immigration controls have always been included from housing and homelessness provision. But this didn't happen to EU citizens until pretty recently. We need to make sure that people who find themselves at risk of housing and homelessness are supported, and that local authorities have the wherewithal in order to do that. The Scottish anti-destitution strategy is undermined by Brexit, and the impact is bringing more people into the NRPF category. On the other hand, local authorities also need to work in partnership with other agencies to ensure people are being properly assessed and that the appropriate action is taken. And the local authorities have to be properly resourced to do this, and on a long-term basis. There's also a pressing need for highly skilled advisors and engagement officers to assess and advise on situations arising out of Brexit. And that means support with language. It means the proper detailed advice in a situation where everything seems to be changing the whole time. So, yes.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Stuart?
Oh, okay, we got to one that I'm less well familiar with. What I would say is what we saw last year with the terrible deaths in Glasgow of the, I don't know, I call them the wrong term, asylum seeker or refugee. And I think that highlights something we haven't mentioned so far, which is the mental health, which is one of the biggest issue that we're all talking about across the whole of Scotland. And I think we need to bear that in mind very much when we're talking about our refugees and our asylum seekers, including those that are turned down, because you know, we don't accept everyone who applies. In fact, perhaps those ones even more on that. In terms of the working and all of the access to funds, there clearly was a mistake, if I can put it that way, the way it was done with the COVID and putting them into hotels and leaving them alone kind of thing. We need to have far more of what we've talked about today, of having the organizations in and making sure there is support and someone to talk to and take them through, and friendships and all those things. Just leaving them in a hotel with water and a food or whatever was clearly not the right way to have done that. So the system always needs reviews, always needs improved. And I would share concern that some people have that we haven't got it right yet.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Barry, are you still with us?
I'm still here.
Good man.
Thank you for the question. I think that the no recourse to public funds is one of the most inhumane and counterproductive elements of our immigration system, and I include my own party's record in government on this as well. I think what we so specific to the question to what can we do in Scotland, I think there is a few things that we can do, but overall broadly the entire sort of process of no recourse to public funds needs to be reviewed. I think we can look at using the new powers of Social Security Scotland to create new benefits or to create new funds that can circumvent no recourse to public funds, so that the support can flow where it needs to flow to. And of course, this issue of no recourse to public funds is, you know, been well documented before the pandemic, but I think it was particularly highlighted during, when people couldn't get access to furlough, for example, because of their immigration status, and that Boris Johnson, for example, in front of a committee, didn't even realise it was a concept that existed in the first place. So I think we need to ensure that the support flows, as I say, because this isn't just even a humanitarian issue, and that first and foremost, of course, it is, but it's also it doesn't work economically either, because if you can get the support into people to support them into employment, of course, then the money then flows back to the Treasury through tax. So it's a counterproductive policy, it's inhumane, it needs reviewed, but we need to use the new powers of Social Security Scotland to ensure that we can get a situation that works correctly for Scotland.
Okay, thank you, Barry. Maggie?
Thanks very much for this question. I think the obvious thing to do is to scrap the no recourse to public funds legislation completely in its entirety. It is inhumane. I think it goes against human rights, and I think it's actually no surprise that the UK government continues to commit to these kinds of legislative forces that are deeply cynical and whose only effect is to make people's lives worse. You know, I'm actually quite astonished to hear some of the things that Stuart is saying, and I'm sorry, Stuart, you're probably taking the flak for a lot of things that you disagree with, but it is your UK government that is doing a lot of these things. We need to be absolutely clear that we need to put human rights ahead of the diktats of the hostile environment, put human rights ahead of these inhumane practices that come to us from the hostile environment, from the Home Office. I would like to see the Scottish Government challenging these issues much more robustly in court, because I think there are equalities issues as well as human rights breaches that are happening as a consequence of no recourse to public funds. And as Barry said, it is entirely counterproductive. We need to make sure that our social security system is genuine security for all, for everybody who is in Scotland. That is the kind of social security that the Scottish Greens want, and it shouldn't depend on immigration status. It shouldn't depend on origin or background. It should be a given. We are human beings, and that should be the basis for our social security system, not some dreamed up scheme that is designed to divide and is designed to make lives of many people worse.
Okay, thank you very much, Maggie. Fatima, please.
Yeah, sorry, I pressed it and it just went back off again. Thank you very much. I'll have to agree with Maggie here as well regarding the UK government's role in this, because the policy of no recourse to public funds is particularly, I would say, callous. It leaves vulnerable people without access to key support to get by. And I'll have to say that in stark contrast to the Tory government's approach, the SNP Scottish Government announced a further 278,784 for 6 organisations to support people hit by Westminster's no recourse to public funds policy. And I can also confirm that we've been very vocal on this. My SNP colleague Chris Stevens MP has been vocal on this issue, challenging the UK government, because no one, no matter how anyone could justify this, no one should be made destitute as a consequence of the Tory policy of no recourse to public funds. It stops people getting access to essential services. I'm sure we all know that. And as mentioned earlier in the question, we do recognise that we do not have the powers to change the UK-wide rules, but I can confirm that the SNP Scottish Government did put forward a strategy, and if re-elected, we will take forward our strategy to support people to have access to safe accommodation, food and specialist advice. This strategy document, you'll find it online. It's also authored by Eileen Campbell and Councillor Perry, who are also my SNP colleagues, and the Scottish Government is making an initial investment of $500,000 to support the delivery of the actions, which include piloting a hardship fund to support people with no recourse to public funds across Scotland. We will also improve dignified access to culturally appropriate food in line with the dignity principles, and we will contribute to the ambition of ending homelessness. And okay, but you can find the document online. We've laid it out and we have it all set out.
Okay, thank you. Is that only the second time we've heard the klaxon?
I think so.
Yeah, good. Anyway, the klaxon's quite a nice little warning that we can have a comfort break for about 5 minutes now. The time's pretty much in tandem with the timetable that we set out. So I'm delighted about that. So we can meet back about 5:05, and then we'll have a question. And I'll just give you a little tip about the question. It's the fallout of Brexit. And maybe get your grey matter into overdrive about that. So we'll see you in about 5 minutes, but thank you very much to the folks who've asked questions, and thank you to the folks who've been answering questions. And maybe Dave will sound his klaxon when it's 5:05, will you, Dave?
Sure, I can do that.
Good job. The power of the klaxon. And if you're not doing much, you could maybe ask some supplementary questions in the chat. Whether the chat column is full, as I haven't had time to read it, but it's full and filling up all the time. Okay, thank you, folks. Thank you. Welcome back. Thank you and welcome back, everybody. I hope you've had a drink of something and a visit if it was required anywhere that you needed. Thank you to Iona for asking that question. I'd be interested to know what she thought of the answers. Maybe she could post something in the chat about it, but we'll move on. Is Susanna here?
She does not seem to be, no.
She's not. Well, I'll ask the question. Susanna, who works in the Sunnybank Community Centre, would have asked, what will you do to ensure that EU citizens who live in Scotland are not disadvantaged by the fallout of Brexit? And again, Stuart, would you be able to open in this one, please?
Sure. I'm probably guessed by some of my marks up to now that I was a Remainer. I am a Democrat. We're talking tonight about the problems around the world, and most of it's caused, many of them are caused because people don't live in democracies, particularly Syria and the problems. And if you are a Democrat, you accept the results. I accepted the results of the independence referendum. Scotland wanted to be part of the United Kingdom, and I support and I accept, although it was not my choice, that we have left the EU. There are pluses and minuses to membership of the EU, and we need to, and there will be pluses and minuses to Brexit. I am adamant, though, that EU citizens, those that are getting the settled status and those who will come in the future, are incredibly welcome. We have left a political institution. We have not left Europe. We are European. I am European by definition. Again, as a teacher, my school is full and has been for many, many years of EU children. And again, they are fantastic. I see their parents at parents' night. They offer so much to Britain. And one of the things about the global Britain, as we now want to call ourselves, is we'll be welcoming to people from out with Europe much more in the coming days. So there may be specific issues that Brexit has brought up, but as I say, we're in the first few months of this. These things will be addressed as we go on and in the future, and future governments can change it.
Okay, thank you very much, Stuart. Barry, please.
Thank you very much. And yeah, Brexit is a matter of deep regret. And on a political level, I think we need to move towards as close a relationship with our European friends and allies as possible, given the situation that we find ourselves in, that I certainly didn't vote for, and many, I'm sure, within this room didn't vote for either. But we've seen the impacts already on EU citizens living in Scotland. Just as a bit of an anecdote, my friend's currently buying a house with his partner from the Czech Republic. And a problem that they wouldn't have had before Brexit was the right to remain and settled status being an issue in the mortgage application, which has now been a problem. It was, you know, a matter of deep, deep regret to see friends from Europe having to fill out forms to, you know, keep their access to services and to keep their status within Scotland. And I think more generally, the UK has done a disservice in terms of the environment that we've created, particularly in the media, but in politics as well, of how we are talking about immigration issues, how we're talking about EU citizens who live in Britain. And all of that daily, the way that feeds into the sort of daily experience of people, I think has been a matter of deep regret over the past 5 years. So it's about leadership and renewal in our politics, about how we unify the country on that, rhetorical level. But clearly there is a lot of work needing done. And, part of the issues that I talk about is our constitutional setup and how we more closely relate with our European partners going forward. I believe my generation, when we take power, will rejoin the EU. I look forward to that day. But in the meantime, I think we need to strive for as close a closer relationship as possible.
Thank you, Barry. Maggie?
Thanks very much for this question. I think I firmly believe that Scotland should be a member of the European Union. The EU membership has enriched our lives immensely, culturally, socially, economically, and given us all invaluable opportunities to travel, live, work, and love across the continent. There is no democratic mandate for Brexit in Scotland, and I think if Stuart calls himself a Democrat, we really need to tackle that issue head on. We voted overwhelmingly to remain in the 2016 referendum, and the UK government has done nothing to acknowledge that in any of its negotiations throughout the negotiation period. Scottish Greens believe that Scotland's future is best served as a full member of the EU, collaborating with our European neighbours to build a green, prosperous and fair Europe. And we will campaign, along with our European Green Party colleagues and its many representatives, to rejoin the EU as soon as possible. I think, as Barry has indicated, the people who have had a really hard time out of this are the EU citizens who have been personally victimised. It's felt like a personal attack on them, not being wanted here, not being welcomed here. And the UK government and the Brexiteers never did enough to challenge the xenophobic undercurrent of the Brexit campaign. The 52-48 split we got in the referendum does not give us any sort of legitimacy for the hardness of the Brexit we've got. We've seen riots in Belfast, we've seen instability elsewhere in the country. We could have negotiated a very different kind of settlement, and I think we need to do whatever we can to rebuild our communities. I think we need to invest in community building. We need to invest in services that actually break down the barriers that Brexit has put up.
Thank you very much, Maggie. Fatima?
Yes, thank you very much. I'll have to start off by saying I'll pick up from the first speaker what was mentioned about voting to remain as part of the UK and then ending up voting to leave. If you can remember, we were sold that if you voted to stay in Scotland, if you voted to remain in the UK, we would remain in the EU. But that didn't happen. We voted to remain and we were taken out of the EU against our will. And you have to look at this the way Scotland voted as well. Regardless of whether we voted as part of a UK, we were sold a lie and we voted to remain. So that still stands. And I can say within the SNP, we will always refer to the Brexit as a shock. We'll say the twin shocks of COVID and Brexit, because Brexit has also had a huge impact on our economy, our jobs and livelihoods. And I can say that with the SNP, we can escape from Brexit because we didn't vote for it. And that is through an independence referendum. Because Brexit undoubtedly changes the way that Scotland engages with the EU, but it will not change the EU's importance to Scotland, I'll say that, and nor our commitment to rejoining the EU as soon as possible, because we do recognise that we rely on migration to grow our population. Scotland needs people who want to work here in our businesses, our universities and in our public services, and all people are valued. We value EU migration to Scotland. But what we'll do now, for now, we will continue to protect the rights of EU citizens to vote in our elections. We have very happily extended the voting franchise to even include refugees as well, because it's important for everyone to exercise their right to vote on issues that will affect them in this country. But we do recognise that with migration reserved to Westminster, we can't provide proof of status to Scotland, because to EU citizens of Scotland, because I know how important that will be. But we will explore the creation of a physical card for EU citizens with pre-settled status to make it easier to access public services, and we will continue to fund support for EU citizens who seek to apply for the EU sector even after the deadline. And we've condemned the disgraceful benefits that has affected EU citizens and hope to address that.
Okay, thank you very much, Fatima. You just about got the klaxon there. I'm not sure if the klaxon needs a new battery or whatever, but it wasn't as effective that time. Alison, finally.
Yes, well, as I possibly indicated before, I support the Right to Stay campaign and the principles of automatic registration, not application for EEA nationals. So I pledged to work to defend migrants' rights and ensure migrants have access to public services. And again, I support the principle whereby Scottish institutions are not acting as Home Office border guards. If selected as a member of the Scottish Parliament, I would campaign for the right to stay. The 2019 Conservative Manifesto stated that we want EU citizens who came to live in the UK before Brexit to stay, and we have committed absolutely to guaranteeing their existing rights and ensuring that they feel a welcomed and valued part of our country and community after Brexit. That's not been the case. People are feeling less and less welcome as the days pass, as they're being treated not with the automatic right to stay, but with a series of ever-changing complexities about how they actually get to continue to be here. A number of issues have to be set right. The UK Home Office have provided insufficient information for local authorities, and the content provided has been inconsistent, and it's sometimes changing a very short period of time. This is presenting unique challenges, and we really need to get over them. We need appropriate central funding for strategies and resources to be in place both through local authorities and third sector organisations. We need properly paid training and preparation for public-facing staff from both local authorities and third sector organisations regarding general changes from Brexit, and signposting to external bodies so EU citizens can be supported to stay.
Well, thank you very much indeed for the answers to these questions. This is one of the biggest events that we had when we explored the human cost of Brexit to mainly Eastern European, but members of the European community who were in Aberdeen and affected by it. It was very, very interesting experience to have. Now we're going to move on, and before I do so, I just want to say something complimentary about GREC. You'll all know about Grampian Region Equality Commission, or is it council now or commission?
Council.
They've been tremendous partners to work with in the Shared Futures vision and their objectives, and very, very supportive, very helpful. And I can't thank them enough for all they do on behalf of Shared Futures. This is a fresh and a new issue that's arisen, and Molly is going to ask the question about it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hector, and thanks to all the candidates. So our question is about hate crime. Obviously, this has been a prominent issue in Scottish political and public debate recently, what with the passing of the incumbent government's Hate Crime and Public Order Bill, as well as the widespread reports that Chinese and other East and Southeast Asian communities have been suffering increased levels of hate crime during the pandemic. So if elected, can local East and Southeast Asian communities rely on you to take action against the abuse they receive? And how do you intend to counteract hate incidents against minorities more generally?
Okay, thank you. Now we're back to the beginning of the alphabet, or at least as near as we can, with Barry Black. Barry, can you address this business of hate crime, and particularly impact of on our friends from Asia, China particularly, and the abuse they've received in terms of the pandemic and that kind of issue? It's quite a serious matter.
Yeah, thank you for the question. in my work, I'm a postgraduate researcher and a tutor at a university. So I'm a student when it suits them and an employee when it suits them as well. But part of my teaching is in an international school where there's a majority of students are from China, given how the higher education market. And the students that I had over the past 12 months, some particularly at the start of the pandemic, the abuse on a daily basis that they were receiving in the streets was just horrific. And I think this issue is twofold. I think one is what I've talked about in a previous answer about the actual example that we're setting of people in leadership positions and the rhetoric that we have around politics. Part of that's also about representation. So the Scottish Parliament much better needs to reflect the country that it seeks to represent. I think we've got quite a shameful record, and particularly having Black and ethnic minority MSPs. And more needs to be done to ensure that Parliament itself is actually reflective of the broader society. So I'll absolutely be an advocate along the framing of the question. And on the hate crime bill as well, we do need to see, the tougher sentences for hate crime, because hate crime hurts more. It's not just about the person and the individual crime that's taking place, but it's about the impact that then has on the wider community. So you absolutely have an advocate here for all minorities, but particularly, as I say, with those experiences from my teaching as well. Some horrific abuse and racism in the streets of Scotland that we've seen in the past year, and it needs to be reflected, challenged, and weeded out.
Good, you've just avoided the klaxon, I think. Maggie, can you give us an answer here, please?
Yeah, thanks very much for the question. I think racism is a scourge on Scottish society, and while we often perceive ourselves to be welcoming and inclusive, and I think in many ways we are, there is still a lot of work we have to do to examine the extent of racism and white supremacy in Scotland and the legacy of empire and colonialism. We've talked a bit already about the hostile environment created by the UK Home Office's immigration regulations, and I think that hostility has been stoked up so that as the question indicates, we've seen an increase of hatred being portrayed, of racist hate crime against people. We need to say absolutely that no to racism. I think that there are a whole range of different things we have to do here. I think there's something very important about making sure, as Barry indicates, that our workforces, all our civic institutions represent the populations, represent the demographics of our country. They do not. We have a huge challenge in that. But I think there's something also around culture and around the culture wars, if you like, around race. When Donald Trump called coronavirus the China virus, he was stoking up xenophobia. He was stoking up othering, and he was stoking up hatred of people who didn't look like the majority population. That is the kind of thing that we absolutely have to bring a stop to. We need to build a very different kind of politics in Scotland. We need to build a very, very different kind of sense of community and social solidarity in Scotland, one that doesn't divide on race or other social or cultural category lines. And I think there's phenomenal amount of work that has been done on this, but there is still so much more to do to make Scotland truly welcoming and inclusive.
Thank you, Maggie. Fatima?
And thank you for that question. That's really important and close to my heart, actually, because we do need to tackle hate. And why I say it's close to my heart, because we are seeing a society where people are just targeted for their skin color, just for even their gender, for the way they look. And it's just their simple identity, doing nothing wrong, walking through the street, and they keep having to look over their back, worried about violence or hate just for being who they are, being themselves. If you can remember, if to use racism as an example, White Racism Day was a few months ago. I did my own video about this, and the opening line was, we are all born free, we're all born equal, we're all born human. So where did this hierarchy come from? Where did this need to classify people into what's good and what's bad based on what they look like? So it makes absolutely no sense to me, first of all. There is a clear need to tackle hate, and what is needed is action, attitudinal change, and that's something that should happen yesterday. We need to listen to the lived experiences of people, and Barry and Maggie did raise important points about Parliament being more diverse. The SNP recognises that. And the reason I'm at the top of the list is from proactive actions from the SNP, putting capable people, removing barriers in order to ensure that society reflects our country that we came to represent, because without this representation, we do not understand the different issues. That's the reason why policies are so flawed and this hate continues, because people don't understand these lived experiences that could easily come from the top at the decision-making table. I know I'm talking so fast here, but this topic really gets me. It really gets to my heart here. I am completely praising the hate crime bill that was passed recently by Hamza Yusuf from the SNP. It just aims to consolidate and modernise and extend existing legislation to ensure it's fit for the 21st century. And it just, what it does is criminalise and hold to account those who express or demonstrate their prejudice in a threatening or abusive way, or commit other offences motivated by prejudice. And just because I saw the 30 seconds, what I'll say is practical measures. One thing that I put forward is decolonising our curriculum, because that's a problem. And we need to start from our education, be able to confront our history and understand why we treat people the way we do, and be proactive in ensuring that we address these. So that's one practical measure that I will absolutely put through if elected, because that's something that is a great start, and it's something that we need to confront and understand. Black history is important, decolonising our curriculum is important, and we need people, hate is not born, hate is made, and we need to change that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Fatima. I'm not sure if Dave didn't want to interrupt your passion or the klaxon has collapsed, but thank you anyway. It's easy to forgive the just over, enthusiasm for the topic. Where are we now? That was Alison. Can you give us your opinion about
Yes.
the issue?
Yes, no, I absolutely agree 100% with Fatima. We need to start by actually decolonising our curriculum. I don't think people in this country or in the Western world understand the damage that colonialism has wrought in terms of our attitudes. And I very much support actually leading with that in Scotland. We need attitudinal change, and I would absolutely bow to the lived experience of Black and ethnic minority communities. We have a duty really to push positive attitudes into social media, because we see it building up and pooling prejudice and hate pooling in social media, and we really need to not tolerate that. Public information is a difficult thing. It can be a hostage to fortune. It's so easy to get it wrong. But part of this is that crime, we are talking about crime. We're using the word crime, hate crime. The police are overstretched. People who suffer hate crime have great difficulty reporting it. The police are overstretched, so centralisation by the SNP government has not helped. The police need greater resources at a local level. They need support staff. There needs to be support for victims and support for witnesses, and greater understanding by the police, and greater education about hate crimes and how they deal with them.
Thank you very much. Now, just for your information, the klaxon has now been relegated to the Shared Futures Museum. It's the first item in it, but it's not going to be working anymore this evening, so I'll have to be the klaxon. Stuart, would you like to address this question, please?
At the danger of being accused of mansplaining or patronising, can I say, Fatima, how welcome I find your enthusiasm and your passion, and don't apologise at all for it. If I come back to Molly's question about Southeast Asian hate crimes, I was not aware, and I am not aware, so thank you for raising with me, that there was a specific issue with that. And certainly after the election, if I win, I will gladly meet with you and find out more and see what we can do on that. To bring it back to the other topics that people have mentioned, decolonising the curriculum, I am a history teacher, and today, as part of my third year course, we did the Atlantic slave trade as part of our National 5. So I can assure you, and that is actually one of the most popular topics in Scotland, that you can do it both in National 5 and at higher. And and even prior to that, another unit which you can do, which I no longer do, is the American Civil Rights, which is just, the pupils absolutely adore it and love it, and it works really well, both of those topics. We were asked by the P&J to name a politician that inspired us and we admired, and I chose Martin Luther King Jr. You can argue whether he's a politician or not, but I certainly, as a public figure, I picked him. And to come back to the hate crime bill, we oppose it, I think uniquely amongst the other ones, in that we shared the view of many academics, lawyers, journalists, entertainers and faith-based groups that it was badly framed, and in particular we had an amendment to add sex to the list of protected characteristics, but that was voted down. So we have a problem with it from a feminist position, as well as some of the sort of the general purpose. We're very much, to answer back to Molly's question quickly, we want to see the hate crime as an aggravator to existing laws, so it adds to a worse sentence. If I could put it.
Thank you. You seem to have either resurrected the klaxon or discovered a virtual one. There is a report that Greg have contributed to about the impact of the pandemic on local East and Southeast Asian communities, the Chinese communities in particular, given Wuhan. I don't have the name of the report to hand, but I would recommend that if you want to know a little bit more, that you access this report and you read it. Dave, do you know the name of the report?
Yeah, it's in the chat there. Ross posted it.
Now.
Yeah.
Okay, super.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Please continue to use the chat. And speaking of technology and virtual ways to do things, we've come to our final question in the formal process of the evening. This is a preset question by Davey, who's a leader in the travelling community. He's recorded his question, and we're going to listen to the question, and then Maggie will begin the answer. That's a picture of Davey there, and he talk about enthusiasm. Wow, for a cause. He has it.
Hi everyone, my name is David Donaldson. I'm a Scottish traveller activist and social justice campaigner. I'm sorry that I can't be with you all today in person, but I am delighted to have been able to pre-record this question for our candidates. Aberdeen, and more broadly the North East, is often regarded as one of the most hostile regions of Scotland toward Gypsy traveller communities. As our communities frequently face the highest levels of prejudice, discrimination and inequality, can you confirm that you would want to address this perception of the North East, and what 3 actions you would personally take to address the inequalities that continue to face our Gypsy traveller communities if you're elected?
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Davey. Super question about the travelling community. And the Gypsy communities and who come to the North East, who are in the North East. Maggie, we're back to you to begin to address this question. Once we finish this question, then we'll have audience questions that Molly's been hoovering up in the chat. Okay, Maggie, thank you.
Thanks very much, and thank you to Davey for this really, really important question. The Scottish Greens want to ensure that Gypsy, traveller and Roma communities are provided with the same respect and rights as those in the settled community. And we will take measures, including where necessary, legislative action to ensure that their lifestyle and heritage are protected. We want to work with local government to introduce new permanent stopping places, which will be allocated in consultation with members of the GRT communities themselves. We want to protect existing stopping places from development and ensure they are equipped with provisions for waste disposal, personal hygiene and food storage, the things that many of us just take for granted. We need a common rights framework for gypsy traveller communities using council-owned and other stopping places. And we need to further protection for the community within the Equality Act. This is something to enshrine their status as a race, not a lifestyle choice. I think that point is really, really important. And I think I want to apologise for the way in which GRT communities have been treated by many politicians in the North East, including Douglas Ross. I think his abuse of his position makes him unfit to be an elected representative. If I'm elected personally, I will meet with GRT communities. I want to speak to them directly so I get a better understanding of their views. I want to make sure that I amplify their voices in policy decisions. I want to make sure that I amplify their voices in engagements with local authorities, with other landowners and other communities. And I think that the final thing is, absolutely, I will do whatever I can to campaign against the UK government's criminalisation of GRT communities. We need to treat it, it is racism. We need to treat them with dignity and respect as human beings. Okay, thank you very much. Fatima?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. And I think I'll echo Maggie, and first of all saying that what the comments that Douglas Ross made, absolutely, I completely oppose them, and I am really appalled by what he said. I am disgusted by what he said. It's absolutely discrimination, and it's an attack on a minority community. So absolutely not, I do not stand for what Douglas Ross spoke about. And the excuse might be that he apologised, but he has not changed his attitude. He apologised for his current comments. He has not apologised for his past actions. So no, absolutely not. And I think I'll say on this topic, I recognise that the UK government, and I completely disagree with it, passed the police crime and sentencing courts bill that would actually criminalise the way way of life of gypsy travellers. And it's already, I have to recognise that gypsy travellers are already among the most persecuted groups in the UK, and have been on the receiving end of unacceptable comments, as I mentioned earlier before. And unlike the UK government, myself personally and the SNP, we will do everything we can to ensure that the way of life of gypsy travellers is not criminalised. As Maggie said, it's a lifestyle. It would not be treated as it should be protected under equalities. It should not be treated as some battle that's to be won or overcome. Absolutely not. And we will deliver. I can say that the SNP has produced an action plan, and if elected, we will deliver our Gypsy Traveller action plan with a focus on improving accommodation and tackling prejudice. And can I just say I completely stand beside the Gypsy Traveller community, and if elected, I would be absolutely delighted to engage and work on practical strategies to understand and listen to what you want and what you want out of Scotland, and how I can support you as your MSP and how we can move forward together as an equal society.
Thank you. Alison?
Hello, yes. I think this is the subject that really bites deep with me. I was brought up in the Highlands. I was brought around traveller families, and I think it is absolutely disgraceful that we still, this is, as others have said, this is the only ethnic group for whom routine discrimination just seems to be normalised in Scotland. I feel great shame about it, and we really need to take steps about it. And yes, we've mentioned Douglas Ross. I mean, I just live on the edge of Murray. Part of the constituency I'm standing for is Murray, and he is speaking to a base. We have to, in order to address a problem, we have to name it. We have to look at ourselves and really take steps in education in order to actively change attitudes. Scotland has been legislating against Gypsy, Roma and traveller communities since the 1700s and earlier, and we really need to just put a stop to it. We obviously need to ensure that stopping places and permanent camping grounds are protected. There needs to be a negotiated policy towards that, and ensure, certainly in the current the current situation with COVID, that there is access to clean water, to proper sanitation, to all of the things we would expect, or anyone would expect themselves. I will leave it there.
Okay, thank you very much. You feared the new noise of this virtual thing, I'm sure. Stuart.
Can I just maybe mention that Alison just said about how the Travellers are the last group to face appalling racism in Scotland, and maybe add in one other one that people don't think about, but one that I come across quite a lot is anti-Englishness. And it is something that really upsets a lot of people in there. So I don't want to say this group's problems are any higher than this other group's problems, but I will add in that that is still Scotland has a real problem with that in there. On traveller sites, I wasn't aware that Davey's question that, and I'm embarrassed by his question, that the Northeast is the most prejudiced place in Scotland for, or one of, the travellers, because that's not my my Northeast and my understanding of people in the Northeast, that we are apparently, but I'm sure his statistics are right. If that is correct, then we are, and we have to take that shame and we have to do something about it. One thing I do think we have to do is we talk, I mean, I agree with everything everyone's saying about how the travellers need to be protected and supported and all those things, but we actually need more than talk. And when it really comes down to it, the politicians and as councillors fundamentally, who they fail to deliver traveller sites. In Aberdeenshire, we have two. We have Maud and we have Banff, and the one at St Cyrus has recently finally been accepted after an incredibly long campaign. Aberdeen City, and I am calling out Aberdeen City, only has one at Clintetty, and Murray, because we're at Grampian College, doesn't have any. There was one given planning permission in 2016 in Lanbride, but I don't know what stage that is at. So we need to have the proper sites, and we need to deliver the sites for the traveller community.
Okay, thank you very much, Stuart. Barry, it seems ages since we heard your voice. Are you still there?
You'll all be glad to hear me again, I'm sure. And I have to say to start with the equivalence that Stuart's just made there, and the sort of denial of lived experience, I think was quite appalling and should be reflected on. I think Davey has been a fantastic advocate for his community when he shouldn't have to be, because the discrimination that the community faces, I think, is one of the last forms of acceptable racism in Scotland, and it really permeates across society in quite a deep way, not helped by the way that the community is portrayed in the media and portrayed by politicians. Douglas Ross apologised, let's be clear, he apologised because it was going to be embarrassing during this election campaign, not because he doesn't believe he doesn't still hold those attitudes. I was very lucky for a period of a few years ago to work closely with Mary Fee in the Scottish Parliament, who did a lot of work with the Gypsy Traveller community in advancing their interests. And she'll be a loss not just to my party, but to the Scottish Parliament in general, I think. And on Davey's actual question, I agree with what of what Maggie and others said, is we need to see a protection under equalities law, protection of stopping places. And I think, I'm not quite sure what the mechanism is, but we need to see a much deeper mechanism in Scotland of having the community actually represented officially, within Parliament and council setups as well, so that the voice isn't lost and the voice is heard. So hopefully that covers Davey's question, but I must just reiterate again what a fantastic advocate he's been for his community.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Barry, and thank you to all the panelists for their answers. That's the kind of more formal parts of the evening over. What we hope to do now is just a couple of things, questions that may be supplementary to the comments or answers already given, or just audience questions. We would invite very brief answers, if at all possible. Molly's been going through the chat to see who's asked what or needing further clarification about which issue, and can hand over to Molly for maybe teasing out some supplementaries or some questions from the floor. Is that okay, Molly?
Absolutely. So I think I'll just start with the first question that came in. This is a question from Camilo. And Camilo's asking that non-European students face a very different experience from UK and European students. We pay fees 3 or 4 times higher, while our visas restrict us to work a maximum of 20 hours per week, limited access to skilled and better paying jobs. Additionally, we can't access public funds, and most of the internships, grants and hardship funds are off limits for us. As candidates, are you aware of this situation, and have you considered any specific actions towards improving the conditions of this population?
Okay, thanks. I'm going to go back to our original format, alphabetically. Barry, I know you've just...
So it's an issue that I see.
Address this question.
Yeah, it's an issue that I see sort of daily, you know, within my work, and I think you know, that has to be understood exactly the situation outlined there, because it's one that isn't acceptable. So we need to see non-EU students, if you like, being able to work more than 20 hours because it actually ends meet to ensure that rent can be paid and so on and so forth. But there's also something deeper about the academic opportunities. So even in Scotland, a very specific example I'll give, we have the SGSSS, which is the umbrella for PhD students in Scotland. Now, they work very closely with the Scottish Government, for example, on internships. And we see that issue of the 20-hour visa stopping these academic opportunities happening. The Scottish Government has opportunities and ways that it can circumvent this that it doesn't do at the moment. So we need to ensure that, you know, at the base level, as I say, that the 20-hour visa for work is removed. But even within Scotland, we need to see actual ways of the opportunities that are available in universities that can't be taken up by these students actually opened up.
Okay,
so a very specific example, but
thank you. Did I say answers about 30 seconds to a minute or so, rather than the 2 minutes which we've been enjoying hitherto? But thanks for that answer. I didn't know if I'd made that clear or not. Maggie, rector of Aberdeen University for a number of years, I'm sure you've got something to say about this.
I do indeed. Thank you, Hector. Not only rector of Aberdeen University for just over 6 years, but also an international student. I do not have British citizenship. I am a South African citizen, and as such, I paid international student fees and was subject to some of the same restrictions that the person asking the question has posed. The Scottish Green position on this is very, very clear. There should not be visa restrictions on students. There should not be tuition fees for international students. And because we believe in the common good that is generated by a universal free education, students who come to Scotland to study here, live here, fall in love here, make Scotland their home. They participate in our communities, they participate in our society, and that value far outweighs any economic value that they give in payment of tuition fees, and it certainly is much greater than any compensation that is given by restriction. We've given the Home Office a bit of a bashing tonight. I'll give them a bashing for this as well. We need to absolutely reduce visa restrictions on students.
Thank you, Maggie. Fatima?
Yeah, I'll start by saying on the additional costs that foreign students, international students face. It's always been explained to me that universities act more of a business than an educational establishment. So that is an unfortunate consequence whereby you find some overcharging. What I do understand is that universities and the way they operate, the additional costs that are involved with recruiting and admitting international students and teaching. So these costs are taken into consideration. But as I said, what shouldn't be happening is overcharging, and that does happen because universities feel that they can. And so I would absolutely like to see that change, and I would challenge that if elected. I'll also say that the SNP has been very clear on its position regarding visas for international students. We want international students, after they complete their degree, to be able to stay in Scotland and be able to find work. And we actually we can claim victory for causing the government to do a U-turn. They wanted to remove that. We challenged it at one point about a couple of years ago. And so we're also targeting international students under a new scheme to stay in Scotland as well, I can say.
Alison, thank you, Fatima. Alison, please.
Okay, right. I am not in the privileged position that our first speakers have been in, because I do not have a background in academia, apart from having been to university myself. I can see that non-European students are in a very difficult position, and they have maybe come with the expectation that life would be a certain way, and that there will be endless opportunities in the UK. I'm much against refusing them visas. I also feel that that we have to allowing universities to become businesses has a result in overcharging. It is a difficult thing. We are all going to be struggling for jobs shortly, so I don't think things are going to get any easier. But anything that should make things easier and allow them to contribute to our society and our economy should be done.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. Stuart.
I'll bow to Barry and Maggie's experience of this. I have learnt today, I did not know that they were restricted to 20 hours of working. That seems iniquitous on that. I too went to university. I spent every day and working day encouraging people, and not all of them should go to university, but those that want to. And the SNP government have cut the number of places for Scots students, and that's been a real problem over the last few years, because non-Scottish students bring in far more money into the university system, and that is wrong. It's become like a cash cow, and the example of Camillo is, I would suggest, not the normal example I have of foreign non-European students, and not to say that Camillo's experience is not terrible, but we need to change the idea of holding back Scottish students going to university as well. It shouldn't be an either or, and it has been under the SNP.
Okay, thank you. Finally,
I think that's last one, right? Last candidate. So
has Barry addressed that question?
Barry started.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Now, I don't know if we've got time for just one quick.
I think we just one more. One more.
And then we'll wind up.
So this question is coming from Jean-Pierre, and I've decided to ask this one because I think it's very important, and it touches on, it's not something we've spoken about yet, but all the issues we've spoken about today are equality and human rights related. So Jean-Pierre and myself are both very concerned about the rise of transphobia and exclusionary feminism within Scottish politics. So as candidates, what's your position on that?
We'll just do the same list again. Barry, please.
Yeah,
30
absolutely.
Seconds, 30 seconds this time.
Yeah, unequivocally.
Doesn't really respect the issue in any way, but I think people are keen to get home for their tea.
Yeah, well, we have to be unequivocal that trans rights are human rights. Part of the problem we've seen the past 2 years, the continual kicking of the can down by the SNP of actually getting GRA reform done. And it's allowed this situation where there's bile and a really nasty environment around the discussion. What we need to see very early in the next Parliament is a laying down of GRA reform, so we can have a national discussion around legislation as opposed to around anything else, and actually get this legislation through. Because I completely agree with the concerns that Molly and Jean-Pierre sets out.
Good, thank you. Maggie?
Thanks very much for this question. Yes, as Barry said, trans rights are human rights, and what we have in Scotland, in Scottish politics, is a bit of a moral panic over this. The reforms that we should have implemented years ago in Scotland have been in place in Ireland for over 5 years now, and there aren't the issues that campaigners against GRA reform argue will happen. It just doesn't happen. We've always taken a very, very strong and proactive stance on LGBT plus equality, working for progressive and inclusive Scotland, where LGBT community members and intersex people can live and thrive freely.
Okay, thank you very much. Fatima?
Yeah, I'll speak as an individual and as well take my part of view. Hands up, I know that in the SNP we have had issues with transphobia, and I have been one of the people calling it out, and I hope that is an example of the fact that I will always call it transphobia. I've even earned the title woke wifey for my views on saying trans women are women, etc. So I wear that title with a crown. And in the next parliament, I would absolutely work with trans rights groups to ensure that we pass the GRA. I have no problem with it. Trans women do not infringe on my rights, and trans women are not a threat to my very existence. So trans ally, I want to be the best I can.
Sorry, could you repeat your title? I missed it.
Oh, woke wifey.
Woke wifey. Excellent. Thank you. Alison?
I think Liberal Democrats are very strong on protecting LGBTQI+ rights. We need to continue with every educational program we can think of to underline that transgender status is a protected status. They deserve the same protection under the hate crime legislation, and they deserve all the safety, acceptance and protection that every other individual in society deserves.
Thank you, Alison. And finally, for the last word on the last answer of the evening, Stuart. Thank you.
Well, I signed the pledge that we were all asked to do by the LGBT Scotland, and I looked at the list. I think I saw Maggie's name and Barry's name and other. I don't know. I'm sure the others would have also agreed to it as well. If I bring you back to the thing I keep talking about, in our school and in education, this is something that is incredibly well supported. I've taught a good number of trans men and women or children, which I'm scared I'm going to say the wrong word. I'll just say that on that. But obviously, as we've said before, trans rights are human rights, and my party are very supportive of the overall principle.
Okay, well, thank you very much to everybody, all the people who asked questions and the panel who answered them. My warmest thanks. I thought it was a very worthwhile event, and I think you all did very well, and I certainly wish you well in the election, and hope that you get whatever you put into the campaigning, you get out of it on election day. So well done, and my gratitude. For people who are in the audience, if you're interested in becoming part of the Shared Futures family, we can add you to our mailing list. If you've already given us your email address, that would be super, and we can continue to include you in future mailings and information. And what we tend to develop in the future is up for negotiation and discussion. We hope to develop a website. We were just talking about that recently. And if you think of topics that we might explore together, one of the topics that we're really interested in is the vulnerability of children in terms of fostering and adoption in this city. And there's a whole range of issues that we want to explore together to realise our objectives. And my personal thanks to my colleagues Dave and Ross and Molly for all they've done, and to Gun from the City of Sanctuary, who provided the Zoom facility again for us tonight. We're grateful to Gun for doing that. And you're aware that the meeting has been recorded, and I don't know if anybody would ever watch it again, but it's certainly been recorded. And it's just a coincidence that this also happens to be City of Sanctuary Week. And so before I invite Gun to close the meeting and show us a video, which will last 1 minute, about City of Sanctuary Week, what I'd like you to do is to unmute yourselves and offer a clap, a thank you clap to all the participants for an excellent evening this evening. So unmute yourselves, and then we'll have a 15-second clap and then hand over to you. Okay, does that make sense? Thank you. Right, that didn't even take 15 seconds, so well. Are you still here? Oh, hi, Marwa. Are you still here, Gun?
I am still here, yes.
Okay, thank you very much for everything you've done for us.
Thank you very much, everyone. And if I can also invite a round of applause, either noisy or silent, for friends from Shared Futures who organised this event. A well-deserved thanks to you all as well. And thank you, Hector, for mentioning our inaugural Celebrating Sanctuary Week. So it will be an annual event, the purpose of which is to bring communities, people who are seeking sanctuary with local communities and decision makers and the media in order to hopefully try and create a more positive narrative around immigration and asylum, which I think would be very welcome. Let me share my screen, and I will also put in the chat the link for this video and the Celebrating Sanctuary event upcoming if anybody would like to have a look. Let me know if the
Sanctuary means safe haven for people in distress.
Sanctuary means a place we can all belong without war or violence or persecution.
Safety, tranquility, where I feel serene, and I receive the understanding and the empathy that I deserve.
What does sanctuary mean to you?
Empowerment! Sanctuary means accepting the way I am.
For me, City Sanctuary means love and hope.
Sanctuary, for me, is having a place to call my own, where I can invite my friends and my family and share food and tell stories.
For me,
sanctuary is feeling safe.
Is a sacred place where everyone is at liberty.
Sanctuary is knowing that you are safe and that you and your family can look forward to a positive future.
For me, sanctuary means walking between the chaos and the order.
Sanctuary means being in the garden on a sunny day with my kids.
Our vision for sanctuary is that every city, borough, town and village will have places of welcome and inclusion for people who flee violence and persecution.
The light will bring you home, and your home is here, my friend.
Thank you once again, everyone.
Thank you, good night,
you for
everybody.
that.
Enjoy the evening.
Thanks all.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
Hi, thank you all so much.
Thanks, Molly.